Hey guys, welcome to ProInsight episode 4. It's our finale episode. I'm Harini, and it was very overwhelming the response we had for season 1, and we're really excited to work on what we have for season 2 for you guys. And today we have our extremely excited guest. We're really excited to have him. Extremely prestigious guest, Dr. Prateek Jain. He will be joining us shortly, and stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Can you see me?
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So we are live. We can start off with the interview. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
We are live as in what do you mean? Sorry, I'm probably a bit old for this stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We are live on what? YouTube
Ye-
or
Yes, sir. We're live on YouTube on our channel, and our audience would be joining us from there, and I'd be picking up the questions from there as well.
at 4:30 they'll join.
It started now, so we can start with the interview. I'd start off with an introduction, and we can begin.
Sounds good. And
Okay.
just curious in general, like how many people join and
So around 50 to 60 people, and then our watching rate is more higher.
okay. And generally, the people who join are people like readers of your newsletter and
Yes, sir.
so most of the audience will be probably like in the high school or something like.
Yes. We're really
Excellent.
excited to have you on board.
Thanks.
So we'd like to begin. Hey guys, welcome back to Pro Insight episode 4. We're here with Dr. Prateek Jain, who is a senior staff research scientist at Google AI and an adjunct professor at IIT Kanpur. and he's a highly skilled and accomplished machine learning savant who leads the machine learning foundations and optimization team at Google AI Bangalore. He completed his undergrad at IIT Kanpur and his postgrad at the University of Texas at Austin. And Dr. Jain has undeniably a vast plethora of knowledge under his belt, which he fervently imparts to the aspiring tech enthusiasts at various summits, keynote talks, and webinars, including those at IISc, IIT Guwahati, and the International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence. So we're really excited to have you on board. And the first question that we usually ask in our episode is if you could just take us through a day into your life, a walk into your life of what you do as a senior research scientist. It'll be great. We could start off with that.
Sure. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me on this channel, and thanks all for listening to us or watching this. Really excited to be talking to this very young generation. So, so in terms of my day, okay, so I have two kids, so I wake up at maybe at about 7:30 and immediately try to sort of yeah, handle them. And the elder one now goes to school, so try to put him into his online school and all.
Right.
And after that, about 8:30 or so, 9 o'clock, like after I have my breakfast, and by 9 o'clock, I start with my professional day. And generally throughout the day, I will have a few meetings. And also I will intersperse those with some of what I call focus time hours. And yeah, by I'll have meetings and this focus hours till about 6. And then again in night, typically after 8:30 to about 10:30, 11, I will have a few meetings with some colleagues in US, etc. And I will yeah, I'll spend some bit of time on that. Throughout the day overall, my job is in some sense that of research scientist and that of managing and sort of founding this team on machine learning and optimization within Google research. So because of that, there is some bit of managerial responsibilities, hiring people and talking to people and understanding what are the new trends that are coming in, what are the big challenges that are coming in, etc. So by talking to a lot of people within the company, externally in academia, etc. On top of that, then I have a lot of these research meetings where basically we just look at papers, try to understand what these research papers are doing, and then identify the questions that we want to solve, and then try to figure out new techniques or new sort of ideas that can be used to solve these very challenging problems, like problems basically which have never been solved in the history of mankind in some sense, to put it a bit grandly. So we try to sort of solve these research questions, and yeah, that's what my focus areas are also sort of spent a lot on. And then a fair bit of time is also spent on emails. So emails is tends to be a very sort of central part in general of professional life, but in research scientist life, it becomes a bit too much. Again, it takes a larger form because within the company we'll have a bunch of emails, but then because we put out these research papers and talks, so a lot of people have questions about the papers or the talks, etc. So they will send emails. A lot of collaborators exist in academia, rather than say just Google. I work with teams from say University of Texas at Austin, University of Washington, IIT Kanpur, IIT Bombay, and all. So they will also send emails. So we have to sort of reply to a lot of those emails also. So that's roughly how the entire day looks.
Right. That sounds really interesting, and I don't think any of us would have had the opportunity to actually know what, work a person does in the post of yours. So thank you for taking us through that. It was very insightful. Moving to the next question, sir. If you could, in a very brief manner, tell us about your journey and story from, being a high school student to being where you are now. A quick walk through that would be really amazing.
Certainly. So, like you know, like, let me take my journey back. So basically, I grew up in Rajasthan, and my dad's job was transferable. So I studied in a lot of schools. and I feel very thankful for them because that also shaped in a lot of ways my thinking and my understanding of the world and the type of careers that I want to pursue. So by the end of my ninth or 10th grade, it was fairly clear that I'm very interested in mathematics related stuff, maths as well as science related stuff. So it was very sort of natural for everybody around to suggest that, oh, you should go and try for engineering. And so, like, I took science, maths, and computer science in my 11th grade. And I used to like physics and chemistry and maths quite a bit. But what I realized was that more than all these three combined, I liked computer science quite a bit. So I used to spend a lot of time programming and writing, like, big softwares, etc. Like at that time, it was still not that open. The programming was not that prevalent, and like the way so much of open source code is there, it didn't used to be there. But still, I used to be fairly interested, so I would write my own database systems and whatnot. Quite amateurish, but still, I used to have a lot of fun. Towards my, yeah, like end of high school or like senior high school, like I started focusing more and more on these entrance exams, especially J. So I prepared a little bit about that and gave my 12th grade exam as well as JE exam. 12th grade I did reasonably well. JE also was okay, but I got a rank which was not very good. Like it was towards the end of the list short. So because of that, I thought that maybe given that I did not spend a lot of time preparing, I thought that maybe I should sort of give 1 year uh, entirely to preparation. So I went to this place called Kota, which is, I'm guessing, like a lot of people already know about it. So my batch was sort of one of the batches when Kota started becoming very popular across India, not just within Rajasthan and like the people who know about it. So I went there and I spent a year there, and I really liked that time because yeah, again, I was in general very interested in all these three subjects, and I was like I probably was also fairly competitive person, so I felt good, like while like feeling that, oh, I'm learning these concepts and also I'm able to solve these very challenging problems, etc. So I liked it, and like end of year I gave JE, the rank and all worked out fairly well. And I had the opportunity to basically join IIT Kanpur in the computer science department, which was at that time like considered to be the most reputed department across all the IITs. So I was very sort of fortunate that way, and the department definitely was very good. In the department, uh, we had a professor named and he's still there, named Manindra Agarwal, who solved this problem called primes in P, which is considered to be one of the hardest problem of last century. So he basically gave an algorithm to say that given a number, whether it is a prime number or not, right? And now you can obviously write a very simple solution to it, which is that take all the numbers till that number and divide them and see if any of the number will divide that, like the number that was given. But that solution, like would not work if the number size is very large. So let's say if the number is like 100 billion or something, or like that's still a small number, like much larger number than that. So what Professor Agarwal did with his students, they did was they came up with a method which was much more efficient and could like figure out a number is primes or not in like much smaller amount of time. So anyway, so like I was very inspired by all that, and I felt that like through this sort of things, like people can change the world, and like how every like how the future generations like even think about certain problems or think about certain technologies like that can completely be changed by this very sustained research. So that like got me very motivated to go into research. And again in my second year or so, I found a book which talked about something called neural network. At that time, it was a very sort of uh, relatively obscure term. And with my friend, I coded it up, and I found it very magical that it could classify certain points. So I was very happy and was quite excited. So because of that, I very naturally took a lot of courses in that direction and did a few projects. So in my third year as well as in my final year, I did quite a few projects and all, and wrote a couple of research papers also with my undergrad advisors. So because of that, I was fairly sort of confident that I want to go in research direction only, and also in particular in this direction of machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of things. But I wanted to be somewhat sure. So for after my graduation from IIT Kanpur, I spent 1 year at IBM Research in this role called, it was called project trainee at that time. Uh, now at Google Research also we have a similar program. We call it a pre-doc researcher program. So these are people who basically finishes their undergrad or master's degree, and they spend a year or two with the lab. They work on cutting edge research, and then they typically go and do their PhD. Many times people do some very fancy things also. So for example, when I was at Microsoft, Bhavish Agarwal, who is CEO of Ola, he was a pre-doc researcher at Microsoft Research. So people do all sorts of things. So anyway, so yeah, after that 1 year, I was definitely very convinced that I wanted to go for PhD. So I applied for PhD. I got into UT Austin, and there also I was very clear that there's a faculty member there in the Dillon. I wanted to work with him. I was very impressed by their work. So I started working on that, and yeah, PhD itself is in some sense a life in itself, because yeah, you start from like a child, you have absolutely no clue what's happening. And it's very hard for anybody to sort of tell you also, because even the language is not like, it's very similar to what you experience as a child. So you slowly pick up that language, you slowly pick up those things, and you slowly are educated. And then slowly you sort of reach stages where you will first begin to understand what other people are doing. Then you are able to critique that also. Then you can develop a taste in what I want to do, what type of problems I want to decide, and then go and solve them and present them. So it's an entire journey in itself. So I like, it was very rewarding for me. So I finished my PhD from UT Austin in 2009. And after that, because of family reasons and various other reasons, I joined I came back to India. And and during one of the winters, I when I visited India, I visited Microsoft Research, and I really liked that place. I really enjoyed talking to people there, so I applied there. Luckily, I got into it. So I joined Microsoft Research as a research scientist, and I was there for about 11 years. And then just last year, I thought that because my entire career was at Microsoft Research. I had known only essentially one company, so I thought, let me try something else. Plus, along with that, Google Research was just being set up, so I felt that it's a great opportunity to set up a new research lab similar to Microsoft Research Lab, so that the research ecosystem within India can be improved quite a bit. Um, so that's why I decided to join Google Research India. And yeah, here I founded a team called Machine Learning and Optimization. And here, the goal for us is to come up with machine learning algorithms that are able to solve very challenging problems. So in the news, you might have heard about techniques like reinforcement learning that is able to uh, solve problem of this game Go. Um, and so you might have heard this bot called AlphaGo, which was able to beat the world champion of this Go game, which is considered to be a very hard game. It's an extremely challenging game, but machine learning algorithms were able to solve it. So, the work that we do is aligned with that. That is, we come up with new techniques, new methods that are able to solve some of those problems. So that's roughly have been my role.
That's amazing. It gives us a view that, from your college days, you've always been sort of this explorer. You've always been exploring and seeing what your interests were, and then that sort of streamlined your path to where you are now. Circling back to your IIT JEE days, everyone knows it's one of the most stressful exams, hardest exams, and you even went to you went to Kota, right? So how
Yeah.
did you manage your stress? And even though you were competitive, I'm sure you would have had some moments of self doubt. Maybe there were points where you had like little downs. So how did you navigate through that? That is something that our audience wants to know because many of them are in the same boat and they would love to know some tips.
Certainly. Well, I mean, it is definitely very, very stressful. And even what 21, 22 years back, also, it was considered to be the most competitive exam. Now, I think that competition has probably increased even 10x. Um, so, one thing that I felt was, and everybody has self doubts. I always was in, these relatively small towns, and I also felt that I had not experienced that level of competition, and when I went to Kota, it was very overwhelming. There are so many people who have so much of skills, and they were already gone through a lot of concepts and techniques. So it was definitely very worrisome. But it's just that my parents, my siblings, they were always a pillar of strength. They always believed in me. I never knew why they believed in me, but they that belief always helped. That is, they will say that, yeah, yeah, don't worry, it will be all okay, you will learn. So that was the belief that I always worked with. That okay, I have this 1 year, and this can change the course of my life. Uh, and I should basically just give my best here, and let it sort of work out, however it works out. So yeah, I used to sort of um, I used to spend a fair bit of time studying, but I used to sort of go for little jogs here there. I used to play cricket, as probably every kid in India, and I used to watch a lot of cricket also. So at that time, Sachin Tendulkar was the god, and I used to watch every match where he used to play. So those were some of my sort of distractions and guilty pleasure. And otherwise, yeah, it's very hard to sort of give any recipe. It's very difficult. There is no doubt there's a lot of stress, but it's just that as I said, the belief of your parents and siblings is not going to be ill founded. Generally they would believe in you because they would have seen something, so you should probably go with that. Plus, hard work does tend to pay. So if you are working hard, things do tend to work out in the end. It might not work out exactly the way you imagine, but it will pay you out. So I think,
The end is always in your favor. It's fruitful.
and
Um,
also the rank in JEE,
right.
at that time it feels very, very important and everything. But then throughout the career, you will see that it is important. I'm not sort of diminishing it, but it's still you'll see that if you are again hardworking, if you are selecting things that you're passionate about, selecting things that you're very interested in, rather than saying that, oh, my friends are doing it, so I should also do it. If you're sort of doing things that are very naturally interesting to you, I think you will do very well. You will, yeah. So, for example, I think so. I was at Microsoft. Satya Nadella was the CEO of Microsoft. I don't
Hmm.
think he went to any IIT or anything, right? I'm not sure in his time he cleared JEE also, but he worked on his passion. He worked very hard, and he is at the position that he is. So there are numerous such examples. So it's not the end all of everything. You should give it your best shot, but note that this is just the beginning of your career. This is just beginning of your life, and there'll be many opportunities.
That's really great. This is a great piece of advice. Sir, also you're an adjunct professor at IIT Kanpur. So while you have a full-time working job here, you're also pursuing your passion of teaching. What gave you the confidence to do that, and how did you like feel inspired? And also, what are your thoughts on having multiple careers, right? Because a person has multiple passions. How do they pursue all of them? And yeah, a little bit on that would be great.
So by the way, IIT Kanpur adjunct position doesn't require me to teach full time. So I can co-teach sometimes, and also I can co-supervise students. Uh, Most of the times, at least say 50-60% of the researchers you meet, they generally like to teach because many times teaching sort of clarifies the thought process. It clarifies what are the main questions that are there, clarifies the concepts quite a bit also. So I always felt that, many times when I taught my friends during my JE time, I felt that my concepts became better. So I, if somebody will ask a question that, okay,
Right.
how did you solve this problem? I felt that, rather than thinking of it as there being time wastage of time, I felt that, by engaging with the person and, working through the solution with them, actually improved my concepts quite a bit. It helped me quite a bit. So I felt that, similar things goes in research also. So there is a natural sort of passion for teaching, but I don't do that full time. I don't spend a lot of time on it, especially with Google research and a big team to manage and all. So what I do tend to do is I work with faculty members at IIT Kanpur, work on some joint projects with them, and co-supervise students with them. And that is very aligned with the job that I do at Google Research, because there also my job is to solve very challenging problems in machine learning. And obviously, students at IIT Kanpur in general are very good, so it's very rewarding to work with them and solve these very interesting problems. So it works out overall quite well.
Right.
As far as it comes to multiple passions and everything, well, I mean, time management is always a tricky thing, and you will always have multiple passions. You'll always have multiple responsibilities in your life, and you have to be very careful about what all things you pick up. You cannot do everything in anything in the world. You have to pick some of the most important things that you want to do and just stick with them and do them very well. Like, you want to be very professional there, and because, doing 10 things and not doing any of them well, I don't think is satisfying, and it is not doing any good to the world or your teams and colleagues. So you'd want to be very judicious about it.
That's true. That Thank you so much for that insight. Jumping to the corporate side of your life, I think engineering is one of the most sought after career. And how did you like stand out in that, in this very highly competitive field, and work your way through up the ranks? What did you do different that helped you?
So in general, see, a lot of times, um, uh, you have to be at right moment, and you have to be at right place many times, and plus you have to work hard enough in your skills to make sure that when that opportunity comes at this right moment, you're able to really get that opportunity and, take it to the next level. So that's what I felt happened with me. That is, uh, during my undergrad, I got into machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of things. At that time, I did not know that it will become the big buzzword that it became almost 8 to 9 years later. At that time, it was just another field of computer science, and I got into it because it was very interesting to me. But at the same time, I felt that I could also see the potential. Like, it's not like I would do it just for the fun of it. I could also see that, oh, when there are, these computers which are intelligent, that can mean so much in so many contexts. So, for example, I very vividly remember that at the time that I used to think that, oh, if there are computer vision models which are able to identify, from pictures, identify that, oh, this part has some problem, then in assembly line it can help quite a bit, because many times parts are not uh, prepared properly, and then the end result is very poor. Like, the product that you produce is very poor, and then you have to recycle everything, and customer experience becomes bad. So it was very clear at that time that, oh, if I had a model that could sort of understand what's happening and could identify that this is not manufactured properly and flag it, that would be great. And lo and behold, that is a very, very common thing now in a lot of industries around the world. So that sort of, bit of vision and bit of, like you know just thinking about problems and thinking about where world is going, tends to help quite a bit. And that's why, like, I thought that, oh, like, I should sort of pursue this direction more. And then I went to PhD. I kept on working on machine learning. It was becoming hot and more hot, but again, still, uh, I never imagined it will blow up the way it did in 2012 or 13 or so. So yeah, like, you just have to sort of, yeah, like, I was definitely lucky that I got into that area, into like, I met the type of people I met there, my advisors, my colleagues, and all. But at the same time, I would say that, like, because I had worked hard enough on my skills, and I also used to think about these problems, I could sort of identify that this is really an opportunity and I should go and do more and more work. And I sort of went there. And after joining sort of Microsoft and now Google, I think the trend remains pretty much the same. That is, my job is to identify that these are the upcoming big directions that can make a big impact in the world. Understand them, then make them more concrete. Understand if I want to sort of do something like that. So, for example, like, if I want to have a computer vision that can identify fault in a fault in a manufactured product, I have to, like, break it down into steps, that these are the problems that needs to be solved, and then you go about solving those problems one by one. So that's precisely I do in whatever area we pick up. We will break it down into some simpler tasks, go and solve each of those simpler tasks over time, and, like, hopefully make a big impact at them.
Right. That's again a very I'd say very well-rounded approach to like tackling such questions. Another question that is very common among the audience is, how did you decide, after undergrad, do I go work in the corporate sector or do I go pursue my higher education? There's always this sort of a seesaw sort of situation with masters and job, and you had worked. As you mentioned, as a project trainee, but
Yeah.
for if you had to give an advice or a tip, what would that be?
I think by undergrad, most of the time people have some inclination on what kind of things are enjoyable to you, what you want to achieve in life. So sometimes, like, those things will be clear. Again, as I said, uh, things are always very uncertain. You have to make one decision, and you hope that the decision that you make is correct. You can never guarantee that, but what I would say is that most of the times it's just you have to be honest to yourself. You have to think through uh, what you really are, what you really enjoy, and based on that, you will have to make a decision. So basically, whenever you make such a decision, you have to understand yourself, that what am I, what I like, what I don't like, and then you also have to understand the options that are there. Many times, what I've seen is that at this stage, people have, because they haven't sort of had that much of experience. Like, like, when I'm an undergrad, I would have never worked in a corporate lab, or I would have never worked in a university. So how would I know that which direction I should take? So you can have very, very biased views of each of these individual, like, opportunities. And on top of that, like, some of the friends that you might have, or some of
Mm.
the seniors you might have, they are also just like 1 year senior. Like, at that time it seems like, oh my god, this guy is, like, 1 year senior to me. But like, reality, it's just one, the person is just 1 year old.
Right.
So like, you have to be able to sort of, take this advice. Also, many times try to decouple that with the individual biases, and in general talk to as many people as possible. So go and talk to your faculty advisors, go and talk to people who are, like, 10 years elder than you, 20 years elder than you, get their experience, get their sort of, learning. And probably based on that, they can then, like, maybe you can form a somewhat more rounded view of the opportunities and take a call based on that. And this is a problem that you'll see everywhere, right? Like, even after high school, or I guess like after 10th grade, there's always a confusion: should I take science maths, or should I take a science bio, or should I take commerce, or should I take arts? Each of those options are great. It's just that you have to understand what I do really well, what I really like, what I really enjoy. And you should also sort of talk to people who have done those things, like, who have gone through that, and, like, understand from them that, is it that my notion of arts is very wrong? or is it that my notion of maths is very wrong? Like you have to go and understand that, and based on that, maybe you can take a call. And yeah, obviously, as I said, like there's always a luck factor, so you always have to give that part to it. But yeah, you have to figure out some options, you have to talk, take a call. And also many times it's not end all situations. You take something, if it doesn't work out, you can always backtrack or figure out some other ways. So things work out in general, as long as you are sincere, you are hardworking, and you are evaluating all the time yourself, you'll be fine.
Right. So we essentially have to match the pro and cons of those options with what matches our strengths the maximum, and then make a decision. Yeah, that sounds really. I think it's a very like a very wise approach. So that sounds great. The next question that we have is when you're in your college years, right? You had spoken at length about how you explored various domains and you built projects and improved your skill set in that specific domain. There's always this question of, do I do courses and get certificates, or do I actually go see a problem and try on my own to figure out a solution? That way, you learn about those technologies. So there are
Mhm.
like these two different approaches. One is something that is very standardized, and the other is probably a more adventurous approach. So what would you suggest now, or like, as a person who's working in the corporate, what would you like to see in the upcoming people who are pursuing this career?
That's a great question, actually. So, what I feel is that natural, anxiety and energy in yourself, that should always be there, and you should always try to go and try things on your own. Like that is what really teaches you the most, right? And even now, and many times, some of my more junior colleagues are very sort of surprised by it, that I'm running, let's say, 5 projects, but still in sometimes in one project, if they are trying something out, they are doing some experiment, I would be as jittery as probably them, that what will happen, will it work out or not, what would be the end result here. uh, because certain areas you tend to have that very sort of natural sort of passion, that to really understand and see how things turn out. uh, so one is that, if you feel that it's happening in certain area, I feel you have found your calling and you should just go for it. Second thing is that, while it's always why while I feel it's always good to go and try things yourself, but at the same time, don't be completely full of yourself in some sense. Don't just think that I can just come in and I can solve every problem in the world. Like, people before you have also thought about a lot of those questions. You'll find many times that whatever thoughts you have had, a lot of other people would have thought about those same questions. So you should give respect also, which means that now that everybody has Google search, you should go and search about those things, understand what existing set of people have done, and try to learn from them. And here again, your books and your faculty advisors and your colleagues and your seniors, those are also very useful resources. You should definitely talk to them about these things, and see if they can also point you to a good set of resources that you can use. So roughly, I feel like there should always be an attitude to do things yourself, but at the same time, you should always be willing to understand the fundamentals, build your fundamentals, build the techniques and tools that you need to solve the problem, and then try to sort of add your own flavor on top of
Right. I think that that approach also helps you build a lot of interpersonal skills, and that goes a long way as well in your
it. That also
professional
definitely.
life. So yeah, that sounds good.
uh,
If you had to, start over, what would you do differently? Like, you've had your experiences, and there were some things you might have wished that maybe I could have done it this way. So some of those tips would be, I think, very useful for aspiring enthusiasts, tech enthusiasts.
I think it's all, yeah, you always have that possibility. I feel like right from the beginning, in hindsight, obviously it's always sort of easy to think like that, but it's just that I felt that many times as a student, because maybe I was always probably very worried about myself and my place in the world, whether am I good enough or not. So many times I would think that I felt that rather than understanding the core concepts or understanding why certain things are done, I would sort of just try to understand whatever is needed to learn those things and maybe solve the problems or do well in the exams, do well in the competition, whatever it was. And I felt that now when I think about it, I feel like, oh man, I school is the most wonderful time. I should have used it to learn more and more and grab as much knowledge as possible. And probably that's something that I feel like I could have done better throughout my schooling as well as during my undergrad time as well. I can give you an example, for now, uh, and this is I've seen happen with a lot of people, where a lot of us, when we reach a certain age, we would tend to read a lot about history and understand what people did, why people did. But I very distinctly remember as a student, I never liked history. I like, why am I studying it? Why am I studying about people who lived in 1600s and 1500s and thousands and all? But now I completely get it why it is so important. So some of those few things I feel like, oh man, I could have, if I could have sort of, absorbed that knowledge more, it would have been helpful. Similarly, like even in say maths and all, I remember, for example, like I think as soon as you enter 11th, you learn how to solve a system of equations. I think system of three equations or something
Hmm.
like that. Three
Yeah.
variables, three equations. You write down the determinant. There's a very particular way of doing that. I used to remember that by heart. Even at 3 o'clock at night, I would tell you how to do it. But I really understood why it is done, why is it important, why is it done the way it is done. Only probably through middle part of my undergrad education,
Oh
and
wow.
I felt quite sort of ashamed about it. That why did not I not sort of link it to the world around me, and also link figure out the basic concepts here. Again, probably it's easier to think about these things in hindsight. At that time, you're under some bit of pressure, as well as maybe you haven't had the experience, exposure, and maturity, so you're not able to sort of think like that. You're not able to make those connections. But still, I feel if people are somewhat more aware of these things, and if they are sort of thinking about why am I studying this, what is the point of it, where it is used in practice, can I connect it to things in the practice, I think that would be very useful, rather than a very very sort of instructional education that we tend to have.
Right. That yeah, that sounds yeah. I think I agree with that because personally, even I have faced those issues. I mean, I'm still 19 years old, but I've had my own hindsight and those things. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and a lot of us can relate to that. So thank you for that. I think this is our final question from the audience, especially those who are in their current college years. They're asking as to how what would you like to see different in the current generation who are aspiring to make it big in the field of AI and ML. So, what would be the three tips that you would give them? That these are the things if you do, you might make it big, apart from your interests and your passion.
I think I hinted it little bit in the earlier question around doing it yourself versus
Right. The
relying
courses.
on some of the. So so what I feel is that many times with this AIML hype, plus we have so much of open source code and everything is available online, that many people would directly want to jump to AI machine learning without building the
Basics,
basic
the
concepts and the
fundamentals.
tools fundamentals that you need. So I many times feel like, so for example, when I talk to people, when I talk to candidates, I don't talk about the most latest machine learning technologies. I talk about things that were discussed and were thoroughly solved by Gauss in 1800s. So I tend to go to very very basic concepts, and I feel like if you have those properly laid out, then you will be able to machine learning is still very nascent field. It's very very sort of young field. You will be able to make big changes there, and you'll be able to make big impact. So definitely go for core concepts, go for foundations rather than just some buzzwords. Like that would be my one of the biggest advice. right? Second thing is, I feel like, you should be, you should learn how to be somewhat organized. That is, many times, I feel like, people start on something, they start on some project, but they never sort of, finish it. Like, we never sort of finish it uh, because halfway through it, it just loses that cool factor. And that's why, like, if you are organized, even before starting on something, if I before starting on some project or some direction, if we sort of decide that this is my goal, this is what I want to do, and I will stick to it through thick and thin, at least, like, as much as possible, I think that helps. And, like, writing that goal, documenting that is very important. And then once you do that, you have to figure out what all skills I need to achieve, what all, maybe, like, courses I need to do, or what all techniques I need to learn. You sort of figure them out, and then you start doing maybe the actual work, actual project. You should document that. You should document how, where, like, the various design choices that you are making, etc. So all that organization and documentation is quite important. And I feel like, for some reason, uh, especially in Indian students, that is very, very lacking. Like, I feel, and, like, this is not to sort of say that I had them. I also was very, very poor in that. In fact, probably, like, much worse than the most average people. Uh, but I feel like it's very, very important to learn. It's a very, very sort of important skill to have. That is, you should be organized. You should be willing to write things and plan out things and being strategic. Uh, right. And then third thing is, like, again, probably goes back to something that I had said earlier, which is that just don't go about of how, like, you should try to identify if you are really passionate about, say, machine learning, AI, or what are subfields of those, and the problems that you're working, are they indeed exciting for you or not, or you're just, again, doing it for the buzzword or for the namesake. That tends to be very, very important.
Yes, sir. So to summarize, I think you're drawing the analogy to, a stack of cards. If your basics are strong, you can always build on that exponentially, and that always stays stable only if the base is strong. So that's really
Yeah.
wonderful. And I think it's very counterintuitive because we always want to go to the top, but we don't clear our basics. So thank you for
I
that.
mean, that's a classical thing in general. Like, like, human mind is, like,
Right.
wants immediate reward, right? But society in general, and, like, world in general, has delayed gratification. So from the beginning, I think if we sort of train ourselves to ensure that we are used to having a delayed gratification, I think that would be very good. And that's, like, roughly what holds here as well.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I think we've come to the end of the session. A lot of wonderful insights, a lot of wisdom that you have imparted to us. It's really an honor to talk to you and interact with you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and we really appreciate it. And I hope all our audience members had, a great time learning a lot of things from a person who's very esteemed as you. Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
so much for having me here, and I hope the session was useful. It was definitely very enjoyable for me. It was nice reflecting on everything, and thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir. We hope to interact with you soon in the future. Thank you.